Welcome to the Free Birth Podcast, a supportive space for people who are learning, exploring, and celebrating their autonomous choices in childbirth. Together, we'll unpack truths, share personal stories, and claim our ability to birth freely and intuitively. Here's your host, Emily Saldea.
A quick note, everyone. Some of you have asked how you can support the podcast, so I now have two ways. If you're podcast obsessed, then you may have a Patreon account and can find me at patreon.com/freebirthpodcast. That's patreon.com/freebirthpodcast. Or you can support the podcast directly through my website at freebirthsociety.com via PayPal. As always, if you'd leave a review on iTunes, it helps the podcast be more visible. All right, thank you. We're back this week with part 2 of the conversation I had with elder midwife, Sister MorningStar.
I did want to ask you to touch quickly on, you had mentioned that you don't necessarily resonate with that term unassisted, and I actually agree, but I'd love to hear what you mean by that when you say you don't really use that term necessarily with free birthing.
Well, because I don't believe it's true. I mean,
exactly.
It's just not true. Unassisted is a term that was used for filling out birth certificates when there wasn't a legal person there. So it was called an unassisted birth because there was no one helping with that birth. It was a doctor, I should say lawyer or Indian chief, but you know what I mean? There wasn't a recognized, you use the word regulated, in Mexico use the word recognized, but a legally recognized person, so it was called an unassisted birth. But now that we are talking in this, bigger digital world and connected world place, to use the word unassisted birth is not accurate. If there's first of all, the baby's assisting the mom's assisting the baby, period, even if she's just all by herself under a tree. Then there's Great Spirit.
Right.
There's the Great Spirit. There's the ancestors. Who knows, a host of whatever else. There's billions of years of biology, and that's probably the biggest assister right there. Billions of years of biology that has every intention, if there's any way possible for a live mother and a live baby to come out of the situation, nature has every intention that everybody's going to make it. And birth's the easiest thing nature takes care of, as far as all of that goes. And then if you have somebody else there, whether it's, the father or a sister, a mother, a neighbor down the street, me on the phone 1,000 miles away. There's so much assistance going on that it's just so inaccurate. It's an error in thinking and an error in truth to say that a mother is birthed unassisted. Now, we could use the word unassisted if she's got a room full of people who aren't helping. In almost every one of our hospitals right now, and not picking on hospitals, and bless you all out there who are helping and with sacred hands, but in general, if a mother's and she feels it when it's over, you can hear it in her birth story that there was nobody there for her. That's unassisted.
Yeah.
But this term that we're trying to use to define where women are birthing with consciousness and power. And look at our Texas right now. I've got a candle burning for Texas because think of all those mothers and babies. There's got to be babies trying to be born.
Totally.
And there they are trying to get to a hospital or a clinic when they could just be relaxing. They're at. And Ruth Walsh has made a beautiful training called Basic Disaster Birth Support that is just reclaiming that kind of thing. I teach that, with Ruth's permission all over the world too, on how to just anybody, an 8-year-old boy. I've taught 12-year-old boys how to help a woman having a baby because we've all lost touch with how to do it, which means like create some sacred space and privacy. Find some way where she can poop or a warm blanket for her baby.
Hey listeners, if you're liking what you're hearing, leave me a review on iTunes. It helps this podcast get seen by more potential listeners. Let's get these stories and this important information out there. Now back to the show.
Every time I see a birth in the car, those pictures go viral, I always feel very sad. And my first thought is, it's really sad that she didn't feel safe to stay at home and have her baby in the most normal way and in the most private setting, and how chaotic that must have felt to birth your baby in transit or in the hospital parking lot.
And yet, if we've gotten to the mind of mothers so that they think, so that they feel like the only place I'll be safe is the hospital.
Exactly.
Then they're chaotic, relaxing at home. So we've got a lot of work to do, but we can reclaim this. It won't take much, because the reality is, that's horrible. That's crazy. A woman shouldn't be rushing to get anywhere. Somebody should be rushing to help her if she wants the help. Someone else should be rushed. Everything should be happening where she's
around her. Yes.
Around her. If she wants help, then fine. Somebody should be rushing to get there. But she shouldn't have to be rushing anywhere. She should be able to go into her old brain and just do what she does. One time I was teaching, it was actually at Uzazi Village with Sherry Payne's group, teaching basic disaster birth support. And I gave the example of, okay, there you are, you're in a disaster. We go over all kinds of disasters and the things that, how do you gather, how do you even make a private space if there's a tornado, if there's a flood, if on and on. But let's say most of these mothers are going to have planned to birth in a hospital. Now, most people aren't planning to birth out of hospital. And say she's had a couple of cesareans and she's freaking out and she's screaming, "You've got to get me to a hospital. You've got to. You don't understand. I'm going to die. I can't just birth like this. Only you can't get anywhere. You're in a disaster." I'm preparing people to help. People take CPR to help, somebody if they're having a heart attack. You've got to globalize the global citizen to know how to help a mom, if she's having a baby on an airplane, wherever. Anyway, it was so interesting to hear the responses of like the doctors or the nurses that work with the NICU nurses. They all start. So they're in a disaster. They know they can't get anywhere. And I said, so what would you say to her? And they say things like, they start spurting out like statistics. Well, you're probably going to be okay. Here are the statistics. I know if we could get to a hospital, we'd do that, but blah, blah, blah. Of course, that's not reassuring to her. And then the kind of doulas and the lay midwives, and they start telling her emotional support things like, we're here for you. You're not alone. We're going to be here for you. And then Sherry Payne, who is a powerful black birth keeper whose current reclamation of her own ethnic heritage is Hakima, and she shouts out from the back, There ain't no surgical suite here, honey, so let's get on with having this baby. And that's what does it, like, right? That confidence of, like, and we've got to reclaim it. We don't have to wait for a disaster to reclaim it.
Certainly. So do you have a term that you, this might be kind of a stupid question, but do you have a term that you like or that you enjoy using or celebrating in place of this ever-growing concept of unassisted? Do you just call that birth, or is there a specific term that you enjoy that feels more accurate to you than unassisted?
I never use, we've gone over this. I don't ever use unassisted. I probably don't like fad terms, so, I don't say free birth. Like if I was talking to a woman, I'm going to ask her where you're having your baby. She's going to say where she's having her baby. Anybody going to be with you? No, there's not going to be anybody with me. Or, I think I'm going to birth in a cave with my dog or whatever. I'm like, oh, okay, that's who's going to be with you. I don't think. I know what I use. I use birthing in power.
Pretty. Yeah.
That's probably what I say. Oh, because until a birth is over, you don't know how you're going to birth.
Sure. Do you think you can do that? Do you think it's even possible under the obstetrical model?
To birth in power, like with your obstetrician?
Yeah, like even in the hospital setting, is that even potentially applicable?
Oh, well, I wouldn't call that birthing in power. I call that birthing in captivity. So when those women tell me that plan, then I say, oh, you're birthing in captivity.
How is that received?
Well, usually either with shock, or horror. Usually shock or horror, but it's the truth.
It's the truth.
And that's when I usually start talking about, zoos and how anthropologists, especially, very caring people who care about mammalian births of endangered species, which we are. Humans are endangered species. Mm-hmm. Because once you have a certain amount of difficulty conceiving a child, which we're now seeing all over the planet, so happy for those who conceive easily, but we're seeing that increasing number and percentage. And then once you have a percentage overlay of women who are having trouble birthing on their own, females birthing on their own, then that sector of animal is considered an endangered species, because if a female can't conceive and can't birth on her own, that species is endangered.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing to do, if the species is endangered, is they start moving their hands off. They're like, holy mother of God, we have got to leave these animals alone, because if they can't birth and they can't bond and they can't breastfeed,
we're in trouble.
Yeah, we're in deep trouble. So they know to stay back. There's the best. I'll send you the link. My favorite birth video that I share with people, show people. My youngest daughter, who birthed at home too, of course. It was the only birth video she watched her whole pregnancy, but it's of a chimpanzee giving birth in actually a Russian zoo. But it's awesome. And she resuscitates her own baby, and she's got a midwife chimpanzee with her. But for people who are birth keepers, it's awesome to see that the birth keepers of the zoo, they lock themselves outside so that they just can't get in. Like they can't mess with that birth, even when the baby's in so much trouble and has to be resuscitated. Like they keep out.
But even that birthing in captivity is more hands off and respectful than birthing in captivity as a human.
That's what I'm telling you, Emily. That's the story that I tell them. So you can see that humans are increasingly birthing, in a controlled environment with somebody else managing their birth. They're birthing in captivity, and we are increasingly an endangered species because of it. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that a woman shouldn't birth wherever she wants to birth, and she certainly has a right. Here's my biggest current frustration, in addition to all my passions, is that we have created a medical system that is so exquisite. It's amazing. So it can take, I'll go back to the automobiles, but it can take an automobile accident that's horrid, like bodies chopped apart, terrible, entangled limbs and bleeding to death, and we can rush them to an emergency room, and they can save a life and, put it back together. And they don't, again, nobody is, taking the person to court and criminal activity or treating them horribly or saying, we're not going to help you because you're nothing but a train wreck or condemning who sold you that car. We're going to take them to court and put them in jail. They should have never sold you that car. Whatever. Everybody just rushes to help and save a life, and then they feel great about it. The whole team feels great. We saved this life. And yet a mother who comes in trouble, whether it was a home transport
or... She was irresponsible.
Exactly, Emily.
Yeah.
All of this happens, and these are the same skills. These are the same skilled institutions and staff that can save a life of somebody that's in trouble.
Much less dramatic with a birth.
Absolutely. So we know we can do it. We just have to have a shift in consciousness, a complete...
So do you think that anyone births in chooses, not from a lack of privilege or options, but someone who chooses to birth in the hospital could be choosing it from any space other than fear? Because that's my problem with it, where it's everyone should choose wherever they feel best, and everyone should have a right to make that choice 100%. But if that choice is from this systemic 100-year-old propaganda that birth is inherently dangerous and an emergency waiting to happen that needs to be saved from, are you really making a true intuitive choice?
Well, I would say definitely. I mean, I'm sure there's fear because people usually use the opposite word that's so popularized right now in our culture, right, is safety. So they want to be safe, right?
But that's from fear.
But that's conditioning. So I think instinct injury, nature deficit, cultural conditioning, and then a lack of, hardly any of these women have probably been in a village prenatal over and over and over, hearing powerful birth stories, dancing around a fire circle, and being fed and somebody rubbing their feet. So, when you are coming from a void, an injured instinct, and no stories and no love and no excitement, I mean, most women start out, not all, and certainly sometimes with very good reason, but a lot of women start out excited about their birth or excited about having a baby, and it's only after being worn down with, well, I'm not sure if there's enough fluid, or, on and on. I don't know if it's growing right. Oh, it's growing a little bit too much. And, just worn down with these unfun, unhappy
transgressions,
number game things of your amniotic fluid index is whatever. They don't need, Who learned that? When the mother has a live creature in there that's giving her all this information and feedback, and so it's a lack of joy and I don't just mean fluff and romantic joy. We've had women drag in here sick as snot, worn out, looking like near death. I mean, they're not in any good shape to have a baby, of course. And so what do? I'm calling out, Elizabeth, run start the bath water. Maya, run down to the creek and get some wild rose petals. And, Carissa, start cooking. And Sister Joy, bring over some of your best, smoothies. And, everybody, let's get a drum circle going on the outside and let's get silent and put a handmaiden in with her. This woman needs fed and rested, and we don't take care of our pregnant mothers. And then, of course, they're scared.
Yeah.
If we start taking care of our pregnant mothers, they're going to choose to birth where they're cared for, and not by machines.
It's true.
It's going to be fun. I mean, it is
my deepest prayer.
Oh, it is fun. It's hard work. It's the hardest work a woman ever does, and it's a privilege. If you are the father, it's not normal for men to be at birth, but if you are there, or a sister or a friend, or even, animals, dogs and cats, they know it's a privilege. They get quiet.
They go right by themselves in the closet.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have animals at birth, but if you are a human and you're in the presence of that, that's a privilege. You're on holy ground. And then there we are. Look what we've done to the midwives.
Yeah.
We've made them professionals so that they are busy worrying about,
themselves.
They're worrying about if they've charted right. They're worrying about, if they're going to get hauled in for missing a protocol or a regulation or go to court or and I know I've been arrested and been through
a trial. Witch hunt.
Absolutely. Or they're just worried about a million things. So when I work with midwives, which is different than mothers, I always ask them, well, what would you do if you were on an island? Because, of course, I take hundreds of emails and calls constantly from women who are like, sister, what would you do in this situation and that situation, New Zealand or wherever, all over the world? And I say, well, what would you do if you were on an island? I'm not saying we should have to be on an island. No, of course, you and I love islands. But I mean an island where you can't get any help. And we shouldn't have to be that way. I just gave the example of how a modern healing center. Hospitals are supposed to be healing centers. Women know how to make. How did we let patriarchy create healing centers that go beep beep and have bright lights? Like, women know how to create healing centers. We would have extra people listening to stories. We'd have beautiful smells going on. We'd have more than a half-dead plant at the reception table. We'd have waterfalls inside or live gardens. And
it would make completely different. Pretty much the opposite.
It's so different. And we can do it, and we are doing it. You and I are doing it right now.
Well, and this is a perfect segue into the last thing I did want to touch on with you around this incredible, powerful letter that you wrote a couple of months ago that, as I shared with you before, I think I speak for a lot of people, but I'll speak for myself right now, that when I read that, it was like reading art inside my own heart. It was like reading words that I hadn't been able to articulate and organize for myself, that I had been feeling deep, deep in my heart for a long time around where regulated midwifery was going and the dangers of it and the pain around it that I have as a doula and a birth attendant seen harm women and their babies. And I just was so blown away by this letter, and it went kind of viral throughout social media. And I think a lot of people are really curious how things feel for you after this letter and how it affected your life and what the response was, if you're willing to share that. I'm very curious about that, how NARM responded, and are you now intentionally independent again? And anything that you're comfortable talking to about that, I'd be very curious to know.
it is a very delicate, I'm not going to say difficult, but delicate subject. And I would like to first say humbly that writing that letter was just a fluid, easy thing to do, because it had been years that I had been pondering, standing in my own creek, tossing sage and lavender into my own fire circle, and really discerning what to do, because I was seeing more and more harm happening than good coming out of the professionalizing of the art of something. It's the art of midwifery. And even though there was some legalization that happened, and certainly a lot more midwives out there, a lot more training in terms of that, of recognized midwives. But like when Texas went legal, under the registry, before it was legalized, there were thousands of midwives, and then it shrank to hundreds, and then we like to talk about how they're increasing. But that's called a decrease. It's not always easy to talk about the decrease when you want to talk about the increase. And so you've already heard a little bit about what midwifery is defined in my life, like the way I know midwifery. And it started to look like a different animal.
Yeah.
And so even though I was so part at the beginning and so part of supporting how can we reclaim birth, as the straw that broke the camel's back ended up being neonatal resuscitation. So every year when I would take it, or not every year, every 2 years, I was more and more troubled by the very first time I took it. I think I wrote about it in the book. It was a horrifying experience, and there were like 30 of us in the class, and the teacher was very strict, or maybe that's good or bad, who knows. But she said, I'm not invested in any of you all passing this. And only 3 of us did out of that 30. And they were nurses and this and that. She just had her way about it. I met 3 Mexican midwives at that time in Chicago, and ended up working in Mexico for 15 years after that because of meeting those midwives. But anyhow, then it fast-forwarded, and year after year, it would just become more and more and more disassociated with the mother connected with her baby. It was all about getting the baby away from the mother, and then what you're going to do to this baby to make this baby breathe.
Yep.
And I reached a point, and it was a required. It's one of the required things for to retain your certified professional midwifery certificate. And by the way, I'm number 5. Like of all the certified all the certified professional midwives in our country, we were all the first ones, and we were like, oh, let's make Abby Kenny number 1 and whatever. Anyhow, I was number 5. But anyway, so I reached a point. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do this anymore. It's hurting babies. They're cutting cords, separating babies from mothers. Why are we cutting off oxygen and then trying to give oxygen? And then, of course, there are wonderful people out there teaching home birth type resuscitation. That's great, but that's not what neonatal resuscitation teaches in terms of its program, unless you're in a disaster or another country. And then they'll say, oh, well, now then, in that case, handle it differently.
Totally.
Well, then this last year, they decided you have to study all of it, including the meds and this and that. And I was like, no, I'm not willing to do it anymore. And in fact, by then I had already become passionate about newborn first breaths, which I've been going around the world teaching now about the 5 universal things mothers do that just naturally resuscitates their babies.
Will you share them?
I can't really share it right now because it's just we don't have enough time.
Gotcha.
But I'm going to teach it in Maui and the islands in November, and I just taught it in Norway and Russia and all over the place, but they're easy and they're recognizable, and mothers do them. Nobody has to teach a mother how to do them. She just does them. They're just, I can name the 5 universal things you watch for.
That's what I meant.
Oh, yeah, that'd be easy to mention. So when a mother has her baby, if nobody's bothering her, like if she's undisturbed, and that could be in any setting, but she's undisturbed. But to be undisturbed, you have to have at least 3 feet halo, or I call it a halo. But people have to be back at least 3 feet. If she's having her baby and you're back at least 3 feet, she doesn't even know you're there. She's just already in another zone in the world of her own. And the first thing she's going to do, it may take her a moment, but the first thing she's going to do is look. She's going to look at her baby. She's not going to look around the room unless you're in her space. She might. Or a husband that's trying to kiss her ear, or all kinds of weird stuff. But anyway, if there's nobody bothering her, she's going to look. The next thing she's going to do is touch. If she's a first-time mother, that might take a moment. Like if you've watched birthing in a squatting position. Those are beautiful images of a mother just looking and touching. And then in between there, she's going to start to vocalize. She's going to say something. It's usually not, it doesn't necessarily make any sense. But she's going to make sounds, vocalize to her baby. And then she's going to pick her baby up. She doesn't pick it up by its feet or, she picks her baby up and she brings it to her heart. She brings it close to her. She doesn't put it on her knee. She brings it up to her. And then she's going to use her mouth, and she's going to mouth her baby. And if there's just really nobody around, she's going to get her mouth right where the baby's mouth is. She's going to kiss her baby all over, lick her baby. And if she wasn't a human female, she'd be, sucking her baby, licking her baby. Humans do that too, but they definitely will kiss their baby. And they get air in their, that mouth to mouth just starts to happen. It's just a natural thing that starts to happen. But all these things, and she doesn't cut a cord. She leaves the cord alone. Doesn't even occur to her. And all these things are doing all the things that the stimulating and getting oxygen to the baby and warming the baby and on and on and on and on. But she's the first and the best natural resuscitator of her baby's first breath. Or we could call it not a resuscitator. Well, she's the best resuscitator.
Facilitator.
She is the best contributor, is a better word, to the baby's first breath, and then second breath, and third breath. Because the first breath isn't any good if it's not going to take a second one.
Yeah.
And a third one, and a fourth one. And the mother is the best one for that. This whole skin to skin is a pitiful, pathetically pitiful
impersonation of all of this.
Absolutely. Or the delayed cord clamping is a pitiful, pathetically pitiful. Like, just leave them alone. Leave them alone and watch what she does. Now, sometimes a mother's dead, then she can't do it, or non-responsive, or whatever. That's a whole nother. That's like people saying, if you don't know how to do every possible intervention, that's that kind of, those people. It's not for like a 23-week baby. We're not talking about
special circumstances.
We're not talking about that. We're talking about birth that almost everybody's attending and messing with. And they know it. We know we're messing with it. We got to mess with it because we have to chart it. We got to chart that we did that or this or that or whatever. So anyway, back to what happened was I had already become passionate about what I had observed. I got to see in India a breech baby born. I knew it was going to happen. I knew this was true, but I knew that a cord would, even if it was limp, if the baby took a, since the placenta is a fetal organ, and it's not the mother's blood pressure that, circulates oxygen and blood to the baby, but it's actually the baby pulling that to itself, then that I knew that a baby that was even in trouble that took its breath would start to plump up that cord. But of course I'd never seen it because I've been too busy being a good professional midwife to see what was obvious. But I was in India, and I got to observe a breech birth, and it was a little bit challenging, beautiful breech birth. But I told myself, sister, don't take your eyes off the cord. Don't take your eyes off the cord. Don't take your eyes off the cord. And this baby eventually comes out, of course, and it's, the cord had come out plump and beautiful, but then it went white and limp, and the baby came out, and it kind of needed a little bit of help. And I was discipline. I'm a disciplined person, so I disciplined myself. Don't take your eyes off the cord. I watched this limp white cord, and the baby doesn't. They fool with it, whoever was catching it, but then they hand it to the mom. And it's when they hand it to the mom that it takes its, big old breath. And it takes a breath. She's talking to it, doing what she does with it, takes another breath, and this cord just starts pumping back up.
Wow.
And, of course, they hadn't cut the cord. Of course, we were that kind of people. And the placenta was still inside the mom anyway, but it had already down. But this baby and this mom, do you hear what I'm trying to say, Emily? Like this resuscitation came from the first mother, we call it, the placenta, as well as the baby's lungs, as well as the mom. And so back to the letter, I had already started moving. I was like, I can't be a part of this movement, this direction, the direction of this movement. I can't do it. And I also felt like, well, it was time for me to recertify, and I thought, well, I can't just, I know these people. They're my dear friends, and they're my colleagues, and I respect them, and I love them. And they're passionate about who they are and what they're doing to help, save birth. And so I can't just, I don't know, just not send in anything or let them think I'm dead or who knows what. It's like I owed it to myself.
And you helped build this.
Yeah,
you were number 5.
I was number 5, but it's an awesome history. It's filled with hundreds of amazing, powerful midwives and women, powerful women. Oh, the stories around all of that formation are incredible. Like I said, Ruth Walsh, who was the president of NARM and single-handedly handled the registration exam before NARM even went to a certification process. But anyway,
So how was the response?
So I owed it to myself to put my truth down on paper. Well, what I have to say about that more than anything is, of course, I sent it to them, and I'm off the grid, so I don't really, and I don't do any kind of social or professional media at all. But my good friend Hermine, I sent it to, the NARM board, of course, and I also sent it to my own circle of support. Hermine was one of them, and a few other of my own close circles of support to hold sacred space for me. Not so much about even the NARM board getting it. I hadn't even thought of that part, but just me, stepping outside of that circle. It was
it's a big deal.
Choice. Yeah. It was a big choice. I knew it was coming. I knew I had to do it. For years it was coming, but still it's like, okay, well, now's the time, and I'm doing it. And then Hermine was just like so emotionally moved by her own, she's just so powerful in her own right and what she's doing. And she's like, sister, may I have your permission, please, to print this? There are others who need to hear this.
Yep, that's
I
true.
gave my permission. She did what she did.
Here we are.
Now, I was just quietly, that was back, when it happened, I was just quietly in my garden. But she starts calling me and writing me. She's like, sister, take my phone call. Please pick up. I said, Hermine, what's wrong? And she's like, you're not going to believe this. So she tells me, I sent it out there, but it's going out there and going out there. Like, I sent it one place, and now people's picked that up, and they're sending it, their circles, and it's just going out there, all these places. And may I have your permission to send you some of these incredible responses and letters? So I said, well, sure, not too many, because I can't read everything, but good if it's helping any. She said it's helping thousands of, in here. So she sent me a few of these letters, and I was like, wow, they were better than I did, I felt like awesome. And they were from all over the world. These people who are struggling with similar feelings and thoughts and, professionalized in their own countries in their own ways, and, of course, here in the United States. And I was like, great, that's marvelous. And next day she calls, she's like, well, they're not all good. Some of them are not great letters. May I send you at least one of those that are, these people that are really upset and troubled? And I said, well, I doubt it, because I'm not here to solve people's problems.
Right.
And you
didn't write it for anybody else. I mean,
didn't write it for them.
You, and for them to have a issue with it is kind of just irrelevant, quite frankly.
Yeah, they've got to figure out their own journey. This might. Then the NARM board, they got a hold of me personally. Like not just writing back as a board. They had designated one of them to write me. And she wrote me, with some questions, but I could tell that it was, I'm not saying that she didn't have personal questions, because it's our only counter to the CNN movement as far as professionalism goes, right, in this country. So it's got a lot of weight to it, as it should for that arena. But I didn't really feel like I could answer her questions very much, because I felt like, well, I know you're saying they're personal questions, but they're not. They're going to go out then to, so I just felt like good luck to everybody. Everybody's got to, figure all this out for themselves.
And do you feel at peace in your heart with it all?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. My goodness. I'm sure I didn't, like I said, I don't do social and professional media, so I'm sure there's a whole lot out there that went on, and periodically, or in the next few days or the next few weeks, people would call and say, oh my gosh, sister, people are so upset and they're saying these horrible things about you. And I said, oh, that's not even possible. They don't even know me.
Yeah, I didn't see any of that. I saw just total connection and gratitude and deeply touched people.
The next wave that happened. So then after a few weeks or whatever, then I started getting personally, I guess Hermine told them they could write me personally. These beautiful, like by the hundreds, these beautiful letters of, oh my gosh, you've, helped so much and helped clarify this. And then sometimes not, like, I feel I don't know what to do. I'm trying to raise my family. It's my only bread. I'm the breadwinner of the family, and I feel so divided. Do you have any words of advice for those of us who are trapped in between, that can't just jump ship, and yet we feel so horrible about, what's going on. And so I wrote them back with, words of comfort and inspiration, because we all need that, just like a mom who's birthing. Midwives need so much support, especially if they're birthing in captivity too.
Right. I mean, I don't know if this way of midwifery is for the person who has to, make a certain amount of money and whatever people like that are referring to. I think that's hard to need it to look a certain way when the flow of the midwifery you're talking about is so community-based and so...
Well, but Emily, I think we can do it. As long as we keep it alive, then it helps, all the other places. As long as we aren't shy about our stories it helps all the other places. So, for example, there's a midwife in India, and she has a backup physician. So when they have to have a cesarean, here's an example. She wanted her to do like delayed cord clamping, right? And she wouldn't really go for it very much, maybe a little bit. This is with a cesarean. And so what she did, she used her culture. I met her in Germany. We did a conference in Germany, and that's where I met her. She went back from Germany after hearing my stories and also some teaching. There's also, of course, teaching that can happen. But they sing the Gayatri. I love the Gayatri, too, because I'm a yogi. But so she says to her backup obstetrician, well, which one of us wake up in the morning? That's the advantage of a monoculture. We don't have that. We have a diversified culture here in America, but there they have a monoculture. She says, which one of us wakes up in the morning and doesn't chant the Gayatri before we walk out the door? And this baby, it's their morning, like it's their first morning. So how would it be if we chanted the Gayatri before we cut the cord? If the baby's all right and all. And so the obstetrician is like, well, now that's true. She's like, well, and which one of us chants the Gayatri only once? Like, we should at least chant it 3 times before we cord. And she talked her into doing it.
Yeah.
And I help, L&D nurses all the time figure out, sister, we've got to have a placenta in 20 minutes. Like, it's required. What can we do? And I said, we can do something. Can you turn off the lights? Can you make sure nobody's talking?
Yeah.
Assuming the baby's, fine and all that. And so there's so many. We can do this, Emily. We can reclaim it. And then especially for people like you or maybe a lot of your circle, the more that women do just birth under a tree, if that's where they want to birth, or in a cave, or in their own bedroom, or wherever, whatever their ideal is, it should be their ideal. Wherever they feel like because get ready, they're going to feel bliss. Now, I'm not saying they're not going to work harder than moving a piano all by themselves, but because they're going to work harder than they ever worked in their life.
But that's okay.
They have their old brain. It's not the same as you and I talking about it. They're going to be in their old brain. So if we know how to poop, if we know how to make love, if we know how to poop, if we know how to do any of the things that are biological, then it's going to be that big biological work, and it's, your hair's wet and you're wet all over, and yeah, and you're in your old brain. You can't talk. But language is part of the new brain. You're not talking about it. You're breathing like a wild animal. And then that slippery baby just slips right out. That's the most important thing I like to hear when people start visioning their ideal. And does the baby slip out? I just helped a mom who had horrible tear, vaginal tear. By helping her, what I mean is I asked her, what's your ideal birth? And of course, she wanted to birth without tearing.
Of course.
And I'm like, can you just visualize your baby just slipping out, just going to slip right out? She's like, sister, my baby slipped out.
Aww.
Right.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it's so important to spend some time in that creative, connective, intuitive dream space where you can allow yourself to get past the need to protect and the need to prepare and prevent, and just get into this space of what does your dream look like, and can you
the best
connect
place
to
to do that, Emily, is with your butt in the creek, or your bare feet on the ground, or laying underneath of the stars at night, like nature. Choose nature. Be in nature. And then let your mind go way back of like, wonder how my great-great-great-grandmother birthed. It doesn't have to be your ideal birth yet. First you got to get in touch with how does birth?
Yeah.
You got to figure out how births, and then you can start to go, oh, and how do I want to birth? Because I'm not my great-great-great-grandmother. I'm magic today.
Mhm.
I'm a billion-year-old cell person today. I could have a candle if I want to, or I could be, what do I want? How do I want it to be? But you got to be in nature to get in touch with all that.
Mhm.
And other women, we need a sisterhood. Not in that moment to get in touch with, but I mean to tell somebody.
To hold it, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, to hold it, to then come tell the story to. For somebody to come clean up after.
It deserves so much reverence, and it's so
absolutely
healing and beautiful and touching to hear you speak and hear you speak from such a space of reverence, because it's I think it's something that a lot of women feel, like how you said in the beginning of so many women's birth journeys, they feel that excitement. They feel that they are, whatever terms they use, they are about to go through a big veil, and it is a big deal. And somewhere along the way,
even more excitement after it's over.
Exactly.
They deserve that excitement to just grow and grow. And then they get to tell the details. They need a sisterhood to say, and there was this moment and that moment, and I said, don't touch me, and whatever.
Totally.
Or I laughed through it, or whatever. Or right then I slipped on the blueberry smoothie and I birthed with blueberry hair, or whatever. Whatever the details are, you've got a sisterhood to share
it. Yeah, it's beautiful. Well, I could obviously talk to you forever, and I so appreciate this extended amount of time, and your light and presence in the world is so valuable and important, and it's just so special to share this time with you, and I look forward to sharing your work and your voice and your book with everyone in my sphere.
Well, Emily, I feel the same now about you. It's been such an honor and pleasure to get to know you, and simple and sacred back to you, and may you birth wild.
I got all teary listening to you sing that song. Just how it's just so simple, It's like so much of this is all about unlearning and just getting back to the simplicity of it, and just what a sweet, sweet, simple little song to sing to these little souls coming on these journeys.
Well, so blessed be, blessed do, sweet dreams to you.
Thank you so much, sister.
Okay.
Good night. Take care.
That's it for today, everyone. Join us next week for another episode of the Free Birth Podcast. Thanks for joining us, and remember, your body, your choice. Lots of love.